Welcome to hashtag 52 Needs, and this week we are talking about safety, specifically safety at work. And I have with me the delightful Kingsley Mortimer, who has a background in music, 4 decades as a professional entertainer. Before COVID, Kingsley was working for P&O the cruise line company as a piano bar entertainer. Kingsley went through recovery from alcohol and drugs 2 decades ago, and more recently founded the Safe Men Project. Safe men, safe families, safe communities. Kingsley's mission statement is, just for today, I'm deliberately creating life with radical authenticity and wisdom, making choices that bring possibility, prosperity, freedom, joy, and inspiration to everyone I meet and influence. Hi, Kingsley. Welcome to take 2.
Hi, Angela.
Okay, so we're talking about safety at work, and obviously when we're talking, we can talk about health and safety requirements and knowing where as a trainer, I always need to point out where the exit doors are and, things like that, and where the first aid kit is. We're talking much more than that. We're talking about how do you feel safe and fulfill your need for safety in a workplace. So what is your impression? What is your viewpoint on this?
Oh, wow. There's areas of life, emotionally, spiritually, physically, obviously, some people talk about etherically as well. There's so many areas where safety is important and boundaries are important. The physical one it's so obvious. And then I think we can kind of become over obsessed with one area like physical, and then it starts to become weird and strange where now you can't even put your hand on the shoulder of somebody or anything like that, because what's happening is that the other areas aren't being addressed, because they're too difficult maybe for a lot of workplaces to address the area of emotional safety. So if someone's had a bad, something's happened outside of work and they've come into work and they don't have the tools to be able to leave that at the door and walk into a building, refreshed, but they bring all that baggage with them, then people, especially hypervigilant people, are going to pick up on what's going on with this person. Do we need to walk around on eggshells and stuff like that? And they don't feel safe in their workplace. That might happen. It might not be a once-off occurrence. It might happen regularly with some particular people in authority, especially people who have got a lot of authority and a lot of stress and carry a lot of responsibility. They're always, coming into work with all that weight on their shoulders, and their workplace is just a really unsafe place for probably everybody.
Yeah. And again, it's not the physical safety, because rarely do people actually attack somebody physically, although I've been told that that's escalating as well. I was actually talking to my cousin who is an HR manager in Germany, and I was saying that here in Australia, the police gets called into offices actually quite more often than you think it is. And this is actually a couple of years ago, and I talked to her and she said, oh, this doesn't happen in Germany. And I went and did a little bit of research, and I said, okay, well, whatever it was, 3 or 4 years ago, there were so many thousands of times the police had been called into companies in Germany. And if we already know that a lot of the cases where violence happens, the police does not get called. So when we're talking about physical violence, that's just one aspect, but it's as you said, it's the emotional safety that really plays a role. And that plays out in so many different ways, right? How people contribute. Do I share my ideas? Right? Because if I'm not emotionally safe, if somebody yells at me or says, oh, forget that idea or whatever it might be.
Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah.
That's a stupid idea.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've tried that before. But
that's a good way to never, make sure that someone never shares an idea again.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So psychological safety is really, really important. So because there are 2 things that people really prize at work, and that's autonomy and competence. And when we don't give people the opportunity to have that, it creates all sorts. I mean, as a leader, would I want to have somebody who actually discusses things with me and steps up and says, hey, I disagree with you? Or do I want to have somebody who sits there and goes, okay, boss, we'll do as you say?
Yeah. Well, I have to just, like come clean and say, having worked in the music industry all my life, like I've been privileged not to have to go into a lot of workplaces, where a lot of people go, like whether they're working at, Coles or, or at in a corporate environment or on those type of things. So my experience of that is very limited, but my experience of that is what I hear from other people, from other people, friends and family and people like that who are not in the music industry, who do have to endure like a normal workplace. And it's not surprising to hear from you that, actual incidences of physical violence is increasing in Australia. I'm not surprised to hear that, because I think a lot of that type of like, macho type of, like biff and biff them up type of attitude has it's always been a part of Australian culture because of that kind of like prison mentality. We're a prison nation where we're sent out here as convicts, most of Australians. And so underlying a lot of Australian culture, there's that. So I'm not surprised to hear that and maybe physical violence has always been a normal part of Australian culture. Maybe that's the case, but now it's just becoming more critical, and the police are being called out. Because we're starting to say, hey, this isn't on. We can't keep doing this.
Yeah. I worked with an organization once, and I was just working with a leadership team, and there was an incident this was manufacturing, where two guys attacked each other with knives on the floor. It was just, one guy threw the knife and then the other guy threw it back, which, thankfully both of them missed. They just hit a monitor, but it could have ended up with real much bigger problems. And that's when we decided that it would be good to teach people some communication skills and express emotions in a different way rather than, resorting to violence. And that created a whole different culture. And it wasn't about, share your deepest, darkest secrets, but it was just about saying, like, when I see you do this, I feel, and when this happens, this is what's going on for me. And and that made a really, really big difference. And we set some guidelines, again, for appropriate behavior, which didn't exist before. People didn't know what was acceptable and what wasn't. So we set boundaries, and it changed the culture dramatically.
Yeah. Well, one of the kind of ironic things that happens in society in general, but particularly in workplaces, is that the bullying person is the person who usually gets promoted.
Yeah.
Because they're a bully. That's why they get promoted. They've bullied their way in, even getting a promotion. They bully upwards, they bully downwards in the structure of the business. And so you end up with all these bullies who are in management and in executive positions. And that's problematic. It's really problematic.
And again, it's the psychological and the emotional safety. It's, again, if you've got somebody who dismisses you, who let's use the word coerces you into, and I've seen this. What do you mean you're leaving at 6 o'clock at night? You don't value your job, clearly. Things like that really contributes to a sense of safety as well, because if I can't fulfill my needs, then it's not really, again, it's not really a working environment, it's being held hostage. But we've talked about, like, cultural aspect of how we create a culture of safety, and that expresses itself in all sorts of different ways. And we've had a chat before this about, especially in Australia, about alcohol. and how alcohol and drugs contribute to an unsafe work environment. And you've had some interesting insights where my jaw dropped.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, in the music industry, we're definitely not immune to, even violent interactions, particularly within a band. Like out of all the bands I've been in, more than half of them have fallen apart because of, differences of opinion, which usually gets expressed in a very escalated incident, which leads to the end of the band. And it's not just all the like the unknown bands that never even made it. Some of them never even made it to a gig. But like we hear about these things happen in big bands as well, big famous bands where like there'll be this an incident that happens between the drummer and the lead singer, where the singer says, that's my drummer, and the guy punches him in the face and says, I'm not your drummer. Like that's a famous story. That's a really famous story. But like that type of stuff is pretty common in the music industry, and so too is all the drugs that come along with that. But we were talking about how now drugs, and I include alcohol as a drug, it's just that it's a legal drug. Drugs are part of most workplaces these days. And it's no surprise to anybody that the more use of drugs, like the less boundaries there are, and the more incidences of these violence, both physically and emotional violence, start to happen within different workplaces.
You had some figures that where they did some testing, and they found out that 80% of people were actually tested drug positive.
This was in a labouring workforce on a construction site, in Cairns, where they they went through and they did the drug test, and about 80% of the workforce was sent home that day. They tend not to do those kind of tests. They try and avoid doing those kind of tests because like and as you go up in, because like you have to start finding, once you start like, see, it might be easy to find laborers, but it's not so easy to find the supervisors and the engineers and people like that. So yeah, that's an interesting story. And yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we've also discussed previously that you and I, we don't have that kind of relationship with drugs and alcohol, and this is about the whole fitting into a culture, that and that when that people feel safe when they comply, it's being part of I'm part of the tribe. Everybody's doing what I'm doing. And the fact that when somebody doesn't fit into that kind of profile, they don't feel safe.
Yeah, that's right. So being in recovery from drugs, myself, and I'm 19 years clean. And when I was using, I had a huge suspicion around people who didn't use. So if there was someone within our working environment that was abstaining from using drugs, or they might still be drinking, and might still be drinking heavily, but like they won't do a line with us, and I'd just be thinking, well, what's this person's problem? I'm not going to, and I would literally not trust that person. And so now I get to experience that from the other side of that experience. And now I'm the one who's not using. I'm not even drinking. I'm the teetotaler, and so like especially on cruise ships, big part of it is in the whole entertainment team would go to the crew bar after work, and I'd be there with a cup of tea, literally, while everyone else was drinking. And so I experienced that, what is this guy? until, a few weeks went by and people kind of like accepted me for who I was, because you're all on a ship together, you're all stuck there, and so, but yeah, I've experienced it from both angles.
Yeah. So again, it's like it's being pressured into doing something so that somebody feels safe, because they wouldn't feel safe otherwise, because you're not complying with the
That's right. Well, there's another aspect. There's another aspect to that as well, because so if people are pressuring me into having a drink, I need to explain to them, you wouldn't like me when I have a drink. It's kind of like the Incredible Hulk, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry. You wouldn't like me when I've had a drink. There's not enough booze on this ship to fill the hole once I start drinking, And once people get that, they kind of go, oh, okay, all right, we like you now.
Yeah. Okay. So in the workplace, again, I'd say we both would say, examine why you drink, examine why you do certain things. And that's not just alcohol or drugs, but it's also about, again, complying with certain expectations that people put on you that you may not think are safe, but because somebody else decides that that's the case for you, you should comply. Have a think about that. And we've already talked about that. Next year's topic is about boundaries for me. So I'm definitely going to have another chat with you about that.
Yeah.
But it's really important to consider, what does safety mean for you at work? And so again, psychological safety, can you express yourself? Are you able to contribute your ideas? Do you feel emotionally safe? Can you be vulnerable? And I'm here, ringing Brené Brown here at the moment, about showing up authentically. And, are you able to again, feel safe in such a way that you can say no to things you don't want to do? Have I missed anything?
No, that's great. And bringing up Brené Brown, like I know that once she had that really big TED talk went viral about vulnerability, she got slammed by so many people, by so many haters, and that was the irony of it, is that she's opened herself up to be vulnerable, and that's what happens. Like the haters come out, because perpetrators and predators, and they can sense vulnerability, and so that's one of the sad sides of it. But at the same time, Brene knew that she was on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as the haters started coming out, and she became popular, it was kind of like, well, now I start to stick, practice what I'm preaching, and really stick to it, and follow this thing through. And she had a breakthrough to understand vulnerability in an even more deeper level, and look, that's one of the things that I've experienced as well, as a recovering drug addict within the music industry as well, and in the entertainment business, is that like if I just say, no, I'm not going to have a drink, I don't drink, then that bullying starts to happen. But if I say, no, this is the reason why I don't have a drink, and I become vulnerable, and I say, because I'm an alcoholic drug addict, and you don't want to see me use, because I will take you down with me, and once people start to get that, it's like, oh, okay, like this guy's, like really vulnerable. That's a big chink in his armor, and so, like, then I become all of a sudden I become accepted. I have this breakthrough, but it's pushing through that vulnerability, and like, I suggest that would work in any workplace, whether it's a bullying workplace, and I know that, Australia has probably some of the worst statistics of unpaid overtime in the whole global, workforce. We do an incredible amount of unpaid overtime, and that's just another area where I think that, like, when we can express that vulnerability of, I have kids that, like, I'm responsible for at home. I have a life outside of this workplace. And then that people may or may not get it. The people, the people who have authority or the bullies over them may or may not getting. That's not our responsibility of someone who's setting the boundary. We just have to set that boundary. Like I keep on thinking lately, I've been thinking a lot about trees that just drop seeds everywhere. Like we get, as human beings, we get to this place where we go, oh, it's too hard. I'm just not going to speak up. I'm not going to be vulnerable, or, because it hasn't worked in the past. A tree drops a seed and it just splatters on the ground and nothing happens. Do you think the tree goes, oh, I'm not going to drop another seed? Like, it's just useless. None of them ever germinate, and often a tree will drop all its seeds throughout its 300-year lifetime and not one of them will ever germinate. Do you think it stops dropping seeds? No, it still does what it authentically was, designed to do, to express itself. It drops seeds every year. It drops a whole bunch of seeds. And so I'm going around on my morning walks and I see all these seeds on the footpath and stuff. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. It's like, why do I get to a place where I want to stop expressing myself of my authentic true self?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I totally agree with you, and it's that sense of safety, and we've talked about that in the other podcast, that when safety comes from within as well. So if I feel safe within myself, I can express myself. So if I have at work, if I have a boss who says, "What do you mean it's 6 o'clock and you already want to go home?" It's about the ability to say, "Yes, I am." And then have the conversation and say, well, if this is normal for you, then let's talk about how we do this, and accept that and then have a robust discussion about that. And also, again, in that point, maybe educate people around the fact that what they think is normal may not be so normal. But if we never have that conversation, people do that. They push boundaries more and more and more. I mean, it's like I used to have this, I used to work for bosses who would see, oh, Angela can give 110%, because I would always go overboard. And immediately it would go up to 120, until I came to a place where I didn't feel safe saying anything anymore. I got married in secret because my boss would have not given me the day off if she had known that I was going to get, I wanted this for my personal, because I didn't feel safe. I mean, whether she would have done it or not is a different story, but I simply didn't feel safe to say, I need a day off.
So using that tree metaphor, you stopped dropping your seeds in your workplace.
Totally.
And there's another aspect to the seed dropping, is that even if the seeds don't germinate, it creates a fertilizer and a mulch around the tree, which benefits not just the tree, but all the other trees and the other plants and the wildlife and everything around the whole entire ecosystem. So if people are dropping their seeds, so to speak, in their workplace, the workplace is going to become a less fertile environment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well,
so really important to speak up, to set your boundaries around safety, to decide what's safe, what isn't.
What I've learned about communication is that any kind of communication is good. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is. No communication is never going to be beneficial to anybody. So even if it's like the worst, most awkward, awful form of communication, still going to be better than no communication.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And and again, if it doesn't feel safe, I generally say just walk away, and then come back.
We've got to do that too.
And come back and say, hey, when that just happened, I really didn't feel safe. Could we talk about this?
Yeah, that's right.
Instead of just going, no, it's okay, or good.
Yeah, well, it's often not all good. Yeah, that's right. And that's a common Australian saying as well. It's all good. It's all good. She'll be right, mate.
Yeah. Okay, well, Thank you so much, Kingsley. This was a very stimulating conversation. And I know we've just touched the surface. There's just so much more to talk about. But hopefully this has stimulated people to think about, what does safety really mean to you at work? You know, are you creating the conditions for yourself, and what are you accepting and what are you not accepting? So thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and I'll see you next week.